brand building is influencing the emotion at every phase of the funnel. If you are at the lower funnel stages, brand building is about trust. If we're talking B2C, and if we're talking B2B, emotion is higher, not lower, contrary to what most people think, because when it comes to B2B, biggest factor in no decision is fear. So eliminating that fear is important.
Mohammad Aljuhani, welcome to Below the Fold podcast.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure to have you here. You flew in from Riyadh to Dubai. Now you're here and we're recording this show. You're the first Saudi to be on the show. I honestly feel kind of bad. I haven't had Saudis before because I know there's so much talent in this industry over there. And I felt like I needed someone to come from there also to give us some insights from the market over there, what's happening, but also to be part of this discussion that we're having over here. We're here to talk about what is the right allocation of budget between awareness and lower funnel, right? And I know there are a lot of factors that come into play when you decide on that, right? If you are selling a product or if you're selling a vision. But before we get into that, how about you give us a bit of an intro about yourself, your background. We can talk maybe a little bit about your personal experience with podcasts. You mentioned Finjan a bit earlier.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's an interesting podcast, and it's nice to see something focused in our industry. Been following you long before I got to know you. Well, when it comes to a podcast, we're talking about you not sharing the questions, and I never asked. And to be honest, I like that because I like the conversation to be spontaneous.
Yeah.
I've learned that from listening to many great podcasters here in the region. One of my favorite is Abdurrahman Abu Maleh.
Yeah.
His way of doing podcast is spontaneous, and because he is a pioneer in this region in podcasts, he kind go to the extreme in terms of trying to be as spontaneous as possible. But I appreciate that because I know that he is trying to play a role model in podcasts. And to be honest, we always talk about authentic, especially in our industry.
Yes.
And how can you have an authentic conversation if it's well prepped for a platform that isn't supposed to be well prepped? It's supposed to be a bit chaotic, interesting from the heart.
Yeah. At least I gave you a topic.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I didn't tell you, come, let's jump on a podcast and just, talk about anything. I give you a bit of a direction. Does he also give at least a topic? Does he cover a certain category of topics, or?
To be honest, I'm not familiar with their detailed process, but
they just have regular conversations about daily life and daily life.
Abdurrahman covers wide range of topics, but what I like about him is he tried to make it as authentic and as simple and as spontaneous as possible, even the way he dressed, the way he started podcasts. And he also went on a couple of podcasts himself as a guest and talked about him making sure that podcast doesn't turn into TV shows.
Yeah.
Which is something I appreciate.
Yeah.
And you can feel it. Like when you listen to their podcast, it goes on for 2-3 hours, whether him or other podcasters in the region that are following suit. You spend 2-3 hours listening to the topic and you enjoy it. It starts somewhere, and wherever it leads, it leads.
Right.
And that's the part I appreciate about it.
Cool. And so how's your experience been in marketing? So how long have you been working in the space?
Over a decade now.
Over a decade, mashallah. And you've been working predominantly with big companies in KSA, big projects in KSA. Were you doing multi-objective campaigns, or were you mostly focused on driving awareness, upper funnel? Tell us a little bit about your experience.
So, yes and no. So, first part of my experience, or biggest part of my experience, was with Aramco.
Yeah.
Aramco is more focused on brand building.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into upper funnel and lower funnel because
they're launching products now, right?
They're
launching the oil also, and
they're going in retail in terms of gas
Yes.
station and lubricants, but on the topic of upper funnel and lower funnel, this is a discussion that we're gonna dive deeper
Yes.
into, because there are a couple of misconceptions, in my view, about how we look at them. Comes to brand building, like Aramco, yes, we're not selling products through marketing. At least the focus was more on brand building. But one of the things I don't appreciate in this industry is separating brand building from lower funnel activities. Like if the two has nothing to do with each other, or if they are completely separate processes. Like if you can sell a product and convert someone without brand building. And I think that goes back to our definition of brand building. If we think about branding is the customer's perception of you as a company, customer's perception of you, of your product and services. And brand building is basically the emotional connection that we're trying to influence with the customer. So
that's very valid, yes.
How can you sell a product with no emotions involved?
Yeah.
Fear and trust plays a role in lower funnel activities.
Yeah.
So brand building, in my view, is a full funnel activity. It's not, or a full funnel strategy. It's not awareness only. We cannot detach it from performance marketing. And this is another thing that I want to get into, because even performance marketing can be applied to upper funnel activities as well.
I like how you jump directly into the subject, the topic. We don't want to talk about your experience. You just want to talk about this specific this specific topic, which is cool because this is what we're here for today.
To answer your question, though, Aramco is more focused on influencing perception. So brand building at the core, at the common definition. And New Murabba is a full funnel. We're still in the early stages, or the early phases, so more geared toward the upper funnel activities, but we're moving down the funnel fast.
We'll get to the examples for Aramco and New Murabba, but back to this split between brand building and lower funnel. And why they need to be working together, actually. And I really resonate with the part about how can you live without brand building? How can you sell without brand building? Because you need to invoke an emotion, right, at the end of the day. And that's what brand building is about. It's how you make people feel. Wouldn't you say, though, there is a school of thought on when you decide to invest on brand versus sales versus lower funnel, you might decide to go only for lower funnel based on demand, right? So this is a formula that a lot of people use, a lot of planners use. They look at, okay, I have a budget. And I know that there are people looking for me. There are people looking to buy. There's an audience that is in market. Why do I need to spend money on making people aware when they are aware, but they're also in market? So I should probably prioritize my budget to meet demand, meet intent signals. Once that's saturated, perhaps I should look into okay, how do I create more awareness and more demand? And I guess this could also depend on the maturity of the company, because if you're just getting started, obviously there's no demand, right? You would need to first build that demand, and that's where maybe you need to spend on brand building.
So the simple answer is cost and growth.
Yeah.
But before I dive deeper into these two, lower funnel, upper funnel cannot be separated from each other. It's a complete experience. So I don't want us throughout this conversation to think of performance marketing as driving conversion and brand building as building awareness. No, but brand building is influencing the emotion at every phase of the funnel. If you are at the lower funnel stages, brand building is about trust. If we're talking B2C, and if we're talking B2B, emotion is higher, not lower, contrary to what most people think. Because when it comes to B2B, biggest factor in no decision is fear. So eliminating that fear is important. And all of these are brand building strategies.
Yeah.
When we have demand that exists and we just want to focus onto converting that demand, cost is higher if we're not investing in influencing the emotions positive. 2, growth. Then what? Lose in market. If you converted and you have no customer acquisition that is happening at the same time, long-term growth and long-term demand is going to be impacted negatively. So you need to constantly think of the big picture. You need to constantly invest in brand building and performance across every stage of the funnel. And with that, you prioritize short-term and long-term at the same time.
Hello. Why don't we take a practical example?
Okay.
Okay. I'm a company. Okay. And I've been in business for 3 years now. And people are aware of my product. Let's say 30% of my audience knows about my product. 20% or 15%, half of them, all right, are in market for my product, and they favor my product over others. Okay. And I have now, my CFO gave me $100,000, right, to spend on a marketing campaign. What is the target objective for my CFO for this 100,000?
Revenue generation.
Revenue generation.
Yes.
Okay, return. How would you split that 100,000, knowing that you could spend it all on conversion ads? All right. No, because your audience is significant enough, the one that is looking for you, the one that needs a little bit of a push, right? Or would you split it into two? Or would you go back to the CFO and tell him, look, this isn't the right way to do things. We need a budget for bigger things. We need to invoke, like you said, an emotion, right? So that we can build a long-term scalable growth for the company.
This is one of the most asked question when it comes to brand building CFOs is, how do I show ROI for my CFO or for my finance department? And the example you asked about is a good example to do short-term and long-term and show ROI while you are building the next wave of demand. So going only after those who have the intent to buy, yes, you'll get the budget and then get them to buy, but then what? And that's the problem. That's the problem is then what? You cannot show ROI on long term for a very long term period of time. And that's the negative impact of investing all the budget in converting that demand without creating the next wave of demand. So it's important that we do not break it apart.
Yeah.
It's a one cohesive, connected strategy. You need to build the brand, you need to drive demand at the same time. And while you're doing that, you're going to benefit in the brand building aspects and to lowering the cost of converting those who are in market.
Yeah.
But it's also important to make those out of market aware of you, because you don't want not to be known until they are in market. Because by then you are too late.
Yeah.
I mean, if I go home today and I decide I want to buy a TV, I know which brands I'm going to look at, which brands I'm going to consider. The ones that haven't reached out to me already and build that emotional connection, whether it's trust or joy or delight with me, it's too late for them once I'm in market to buy.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's not going to be, it's not a conversion ad that's going to make you decide, right? It's going to be this very, very cool video that's going to make you feel like, I want this, right? It needs to be this immersive experience.
Emotion.
And that is invoking emotion, like you rightfully said. That's going to be the reason, right, why you're going to buy, or that's going to give you the reason to believe, right, why this TV is the right one for you. And that typically comes from a branding campaign, right? Not a lower funnel.
I mean, if we define branding and brand building as we said at the beginning, then we can think about this in the right way. We are in our industry, we're locked in a mindset. When we talk about branding on awareness, immediately we're thinking upper funnel. When we talk about performance, we're immediately thinking about driving conversions. We're not thinking about the bigger perspective.
Yeah.
We always talk about we need to be customer centric. We need to be customer centric in our definitions.
Yeah.
Like brand building starts with the customer. What's their perception? What's their emotions toward the brand? How can I change that? What stage are they in? And how can I invoke the positive emotions that I'm after?
Okay.
Once we set the definition right, and one of the interesting things I heard recently, and I hope I recall it correctly, but the value of brief development is more important than the campaign itself, because it makes us think of these things, of what we want to achieve, what the customer wants, where are they? And these kind of questions that comes up in the brief helps us be more successful. So it's just the same thing.
I feel like the entire industry would be cheering for you right now, especially agencies on the brief, because I know a lot of folks that work in this field. They suffer from very bad quality briefs. But yeah, I agree. Like the brief is just as important, right?
I get that us as clients and advertisers are busy, and we want the agencies to do as much as possible of the work. We paid for that. At least that's the mindset. But the brief is not about doing some of the agency's work. It's about us thinking of what we want and what we want from the customer, what the customer wants from us, where they are. Sitting down and developing the brief help us understand the bigger picture.
Yeah.
So later down the process, when we work with our agencies on a campaign, we have that big picture painted. We invested time and thought in the brief development and in research that goes before it, to a point where our decision have a North Star. That North Star is a brief.
Yeah.
It's no longer subjective, even if it's a creative development. Subjectivity gets, I wouldn't say eliminated, but minimized to very low level. But when you don't have that North Star, which is your brief, and the strategic work that you put into it, you react every step of the process. And you turn yourself into the customer and start evaluating and judging parts of the process based on yourself. But you're not the customer.
Yeah.
Customer is out there. And when we do our job right in brief development, then we know how to put ourselves in the customer's shoes and be able to create something that really moves the needle. It's a very competitive market nowadays.
Yeah.
That's why brand building is important.
Yeah.
Because it's no longer a market where you could put any product out there and launch a big campaign and expect to move the product. Now you have to drive value. You have to be like Jeff Bezos says, customer obsessed, and make sure the experience is fantastic. Because we do everything right, and the customer experience is not up to their expectations, and even not up to him, more than satisfactory to the customer, like where it delights them, then long-term brand building is going to hurt, because that's the emotion.
Yeah. And this brief doesn't just come down out of nowhere, right? No. It's not a brief, and you're thinking about, we're talking about how the brief is very important, and it needs to be done right, and it gives you the chance to take a step back, look at the bigger picture. But what it needs to come from, essentially, is a proper long-term strategy, right? At least a year or 2 year strategy that includes brand building. Where are you? What are your brand building activities? What are your maybe more, hygiene type activities? What are the other activities, right, along the calendar, right? And that is essentially what needs to be cracked, right? And for these different activities, then you start deploying these briefs, correct?
Yes, look, creativity in our industry is not limited to artwork or copyright. So when it comes to the brief, there is a creative part to it. It absolutely cannot be not grounded in research and in strategy. It has to be stemmed out of that. But the marketing in its entirety is creative. You're dealing with human behavior. So creativity is essential. So there are some inspiration. There are some creative ways of coming at the brief. And that's how you get award-winning campaigns, is when you come up with a brief that's creative enough, but also grounded in the customer enough, and in the strategy, and in the product, and in the emotions that you want to invoke. When you put all the recipe all together correctly, that's how you end up with an award-winning campaign. And that's how you end up with generating demand and growth, reducing cost.
Yeah. I feel perhaps the way we're measuring it now, brand building, is a challenge for people to really grasp what you mean, or really understand the value of brand building, right? Ideally, you should be able to measure ROI from brand building, right? Even if it's upper funnel, even if it's just awareness, so that you really give it its I guess its investment over time, right? And that's the challenge I think perhaps a lot of people face, and also what's the incrementality, right, of awareness versus conversion, right? Today, what are the tools to measure brand building?
Okay, let's agree on a few things first. One, the funnel is not a straight line. It's a messy middle, as they say.
Yeah.
And we are in the business of influence, as LinkedIn puts it. When it comes to measuring brand building, today it's much easier than a decade ago. Once we understand the definition properly, then the answer would be, or the easiest answer, the first thing I would go to is microconversion. Okay, now we've agreed that brand building is invoking emotions. How? What mediums am I using? What formats am I using? What action do I want the user to do? Because that action, in my opinion, and from my research, is going to raise awareness.
Yeah.
And build the microconversions and use performance marketing to optimize toward that.
Yeah.
And that's my go-to way of measuring upper funnel activities.
Yeah.
And then you also, of course, brand health trackers,
Yes, I was just gonna
brand
mention
life
those.
studies.
Yes.
All of these are helpful, but the reason I started with the disclaimer that it's not a straight line is because we cannot tie every dollar in to every dollar out. We are dealing with human behavior that's very messy. So data, our signals are not absolute truth.
Yeah.
They're not the absolute truth. So you look at these microconversions, you look at brand health studies, brand lift studies, brand health trackers, but with the mindset that this is not the absolute truth.
Yeah.
And these are not a checklist that you check the box and you move on. Brand health tracker, if you really want to benefit from brand health trackers, then you need to invest time in designing the questionnaire.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important.
Yes.
Framing one question one way or the other could generate different results because people would tell you things that are not necessarily representative of the truth.
Yes.
Depends on how they're asked a question, what was the question, what setting they were in. So quantitative followed with qualitative questionnaire that is designed smart, and also the pool of the sample for the research is just as important.
Yeah.
It's not just ticking the box. Let's hire a research agency. Okay, this is the group of people that you have access to. All right, this is the basic questions. Do you recall seeing an ad, or where have you seen our ad? Well, you could ask someone, where have you seen New Murabba?
Yeah.
And they'll tell you YouTube, but in fact, they've seen it somewhere else.
Yeah. Instagram.
Yeah. Because memory is a tricky thing, and sometimes getting the absolute truth from the audience is not a straightforward line. So you do these, you get the data, there are signals, you see impact on your microconversions. If you are in a full funnel strategy, you see the impact down the line.
Yeah.
If you're generating these, for example, is the cost going down or not? Because at the end of the day, our job is revenue generation.
Yeah. You might find a situation where your brand health tracker is showing an upward trend, but you're not seeing any conversion, for example. That's an example of how broken is the funnel, right? And sometimes you really can't predict human behavior. But I do think that the more time that you spend on data, you should be able to start to make sense of it, right? And see certain patterns. It's not the absolute truth, you're right, but you should manage to pinpoint what's working, what's not working, right? By looking at least at your own historical data with, like you said, the right rigor. And making sure that the questions are qualitative, the sample size is good, the the MMM study that you're running also is accounts for all the different activities. Yeah, I mean,
Look, there are basic things that we have to always. Measurement frameworks are important, and there are layers. And you have to layer it also with ad verification, data, attention metrics. All of these are important, and I look at them personally at least once a week, if not more than that, going deeper into the data and just understanding how things are moving. But what we always have to remind ourselves of is this is not the absolute truth. This is part of the image.
Yeah.
What is the bigger picture? If brand health tracker is going up, but I'm not seeing any demand, what's going on?
Yeah.
We have to look. So we have to step back and think of the bigger picture, not try to break it down into small pieces and focus on every piece as it has nothing to do with the other.
Yeah, yeah.
How am I doing on search? How am I doing on engagement?
Yeah.
What the comment section is saying, and really pay attention to the customer.
What do you think about BLS studies? Useful, not useful? Ticking the box.
It depends. Me personally, I'm a big believer, as you may know, in always home.
Yeah.
And we are out there 24/7 across multiple channels.
Yeah.
I still do brand lift studies, but I'm always hit with contamination,
Yeah.
which is one of the challenges for when it comes to brand lift studies. But what I did to make use of brand lift studies to avoid contamination is I look at them differently. Usually brand lift studies, the word is there, lift. You look at the lift.
Mm-hmm.
But today, because of contamination, most of my results, exposed and controlled, are almost equal.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a negative.
Negative means there's no lift.
Negative lift. But I look at, let's take Instagram, for example. If my exposed was on message recall or brand recall in Q1 at 30% exposed, forget the control.
Yeah.
And then I invested more in Q2 in my always on by 10%. Then I look at how much have the exposed grown in Q2. It's very tactical, not necessarily scientific, but it's my way to make use of data that are available to me.
Yeah.
So when my investment goes up, I expect the recall to go up by a certain margin. If it doesn't mean Instagram did not deliver, but it means I need to look further to make sense of the data.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good good call out. It would be interesting to bring one of these marketing science
I'm not a researcher.
partners
I'm not a researcher.
and ask some questions. But I do recall that one of the ways to look at quarter on quarter or campaign to campaign performance on BLS is to look at the baseline. So the controlled group, not the exposed, because your controlled may have increased via other means or via the same platform. So maybe your lift is lower quarter on quarter, but that's because maybe your control went up significantly.
And that's basically what I do is I use previous or historical brand lift studies as the baseline rather than the control versus the export. Again, it's part of the bigger picture.
Yeah.
With the brand health trackers, with other performance metrics that we look at across the funnel, like micro conversions, you get a bigger picture.
Yeah. Like you said, a proper measurement framework property that ties as many metrics as possible so that you can make sense of things. And this is only a reference, or it's only an indication. It's not the absolute truth. That's helpful, because I would imagine a lot of these new projects now in KSA, if we take some concrete examples now, or if we talk in practical terms, are relying heavily on upper funnel measurement, right? Because of the nature of their product, what they're selling, which is not selling actually yet. They're only operating on upper funnel, right? And so measurement becomes a little bit tricky here. And so they do rely heavily on BLS. They do rely heavily on brand tracker. I've seen cases where, yes, the brand tracker, health tracker wasn't very indicative because of the questions weren't good, weren't great, right? They weren't addressing the right audience. I wonder if soft conversions you mentioned is an indication of how good you're doing, right? On upper funnel, would you say it's also as good as?
Yes, definitely. They are good signals, and it's a way to judge what we're doing. As we said, the journey is not a straight line. Not every dollar you spend, you can link it down to revenue generated. So micro conversions helps a lot in understanding part of the picture, evaluating the strategies that we're using on the media side and on the creative side. If
it really shows you a very good indication on if someone is interested, which is a very far stage of where you can reach with a customer, especially if you're not selling anything concrete yet, right? And it's also it can also be quantifiable down to a single person, right? You're not running a survey or a BLS that is against a specific sample, and this is just an indication. It's not for everyone. This is micro conversions, on the other hand, can really give you an indication on how many people actually, right? Individuals, as opposed to an indication, right?
Not only would it tell you if they're interested, but it also tell you if you are doing it in an interesting way. Are you invoking the right emotions? Is your message getting across? So if you see positive numbers in micro conversions, it tells you that what you're doing is resonating. Now, are you reaching the right audience or the wrong audience? That's a separate question. But are we getting across? Are we resonating? Are we making a connection with the audience? And these micro conversions tells you that. Tells you, oh, there are engagements. And you have to be deliberate about what type of micro conversion you want to go after based on how you design your activity. And there might be more than one that you look at.
Can you give me an example? Just an example of a micro conversion. Is it someone engaged with a specific section of the website, for example, or the landing page? Or is it someone that has submitted a form?
Any of these. First thing came to mind is the first one you gave is, say that I want to unpack a complicated concept, right? And I want my audience to read an article, or at least let's say part of them, because not everyone is gonna consume content in the same way. But say one of the formats that I have in my campaign is reading an article with some visuals and illustrations that help break down the concept. Then time spent on that page is a micro conversion. Are they spending enough time?
Yeah.
Now it's your job to drive them there. If you're not driving them there, then the problem is not bad numbers in this micro conversion. The problem is somewhere else. You need to fix it, drive the traffic to this landing page. And once they reach it, then you monitor. How are you doing on time spent? You could look at engagement metrics also to gain a better understanding of how the audience is interacting. And if it's not doing well, then you have to take a step back, figure out what went wrong.
Yeah.
Because it's not a simple answer, and it isn't always the same. It could be creative, it could be we're doing something wrong with media, driving the wrong traffic, it could be the format. So finding the right formats, multiple formats, A/B testing, all of that together. And that's why it goes back to the point where I said performance marketing is not lower funnel only. It's also an upper funnel strategic approach. And this is where it comes in, is how you optimize, how you A/B test, how you retarget when you need to retarget.
What have you seen works better to affect, to give you more high quality micro conversions? Video or static, or a combination of both, or it's not really like any, it's not either one or the other, it's both together?
Yeah, look, a mix of formats is always helpful. Me personally, I have my own unique way of going at
Enlighten
things.
us. That's what you're here for.
So I'm a bit obsessed about the media products. So when I meet with media suppliers, I invest a lot of time looking at the product and how the customer would engage with them. So to me, if you are an advertiser, a supplier, and you come to me and say, well, I have these products and they're performing well, and here are the numbers, and so did very well, that's not enough for it. To me is, what's your product? How interesting it is? How the customer is going to engage with it? So I try to immerse myself in the shoes of the customer.
What's the experience you're going to get? Yeah.
And one of the misconception that happens is sometimes us marketers think that the customer is sitting behind that screen waiting for our ad to come up on screen, and they're following every single ad that we're pushing out there, to a point where we design our campaigns and our activities to ourselves, not to a customer that is in their day. If you're on connected TV, they're watching a show, you're interrupting
You're getting
them.
bombarded with different content from different sources. Yeah.
So I put myself in the shoe of a customer, and I understand the medium, the format, how is it going to disrupt them? How do I make my ad as pleasant as possible? And is this the right product for me?
Yeah.
And part of that analysis is, what format am I going to use? A video is big, and video is the predominant format. But I see strong results with statics as well.
Yeah. The reason I mentioned video is you could achieve with a completed view something that is more impactful than a 30-second website visit. You know, you didn't drive the user to your landing page. You didn't have to. You conveyed your message and you invoked a feeling only with the video. Okay, he saw the entire video, and you managed to invoke that feeling. Oh, you didn't have to drive him to the website or to get him to convert, right? Would you say this is valid, or in this sense, would you look at completed views the same way you look at a micro conversion?
Yes, I do look at completed views as micro conversions, but video is one of the good formats to invoke emotions early in the awareness phase.
Yeah.
When it comes to landing page, this is more of a consideration activity.
More about action. Yeah.
So when they're considering now, they're going deep. You've invoked the emotion. You still got to maintain building the emotional connection, even in the consideration phase.
Yeah.
But this is more of a consideration for me rather than making you aware and building that early on emotional connections with the customer.
Yeah.
So video is very powerful. I buy a lot of video products, and I like the non-skippable video products. But, the challenge is attention. Attention is retaining attention is very difficult. While we think we're generating 94% of completed views in a non-skippable ad, you have to take that with a grain of salt. Yeah, but in a multi-screen world, you have a completed views, but did you have the right attention or not? So it's a powerful tool, and I agree. Videos is good at building that emotional connection, but you need multiple formats because you're dealing with different type of customers who prefer to consume and engage in different ways.
Let's talk about other formats, especially for attention, or on the non-skippable topic. CTV ads, right? We're seeing really good numbers, especially on completion rates.
Yeah.
But there may be a challenge on attention, right? Because I think most of them are unskippable. I say I think because I can't talk on behalf of all of the
some are skippable, some
CTV
are
suppliers, right? But again, here you have a measurement challenge, right? Because you're not able to track the micro conversions of all of them. Not all of them can track, post view, I guess, website activity. Some of them are becoming a little bit better with QR codes. Some of them are able to track via pixels, right? That they can implement on your landing page. Is CTV an area where people are paying more attention as a screen than others?
That's why you cannot break down the parts of the fund and link every dollar spent to revenue generated. We cannot think about it this way. Just because I can measure it doesn't mean that it has no value. I love CTVs, and I invest in CTVs, non-skippable CTVs. Yes, it's hard to measure, but it's hard to measure CTV. It's not hard to measure how my brand health is going. It's not hard to measure how search is doing.
Yeah.
It's not hard to measure how micro conversion are dropping in cost. So that's why it has to be cohesive in terms of measurements and in terms of journey. But I also go back to my point where I'm a bit obsessed about looking at the product. To make sure of that point is, I cannot measure it, but let me put myself in the shoe of the customer and see this non-skippable ad.
Yeah.
If you take CBS in the US, they have their
CTV offering.
And their streaming services.
Yeah.
And I love the shows that they produce, but I stopped watching. Reason is I couldn't subscribe with a Saudi credit card. It had to be in the US, and I guess it has to do with licensing. But when I watch with ads, there are 3 or 4 breaks. Each break has 6 ads. That's insane. That is too much.
Yeah.
That's too much. You're talking about 2-3 minutes where you expect the viewer to stay looking at the screen, watching a 30-second ad after a 60-second ad after a 30-second ad, going through 6-7 commercials in one break. And that's why when we sponsored Sokrat, the Thamani's podcast, we made sure we minimized the number of ads. We became the exclusive sponsor of the podcast. And with that, we get all the slots in the program. But we wanted to make sure that the viewer enjoys watching the show, because if they do, then our ads, our presence on the program will resonate better. So we took half of the slots and we didn't use them.
Yeah.
And we agreed with the mania that we're not going to use these slots. We're going to make the experience better. We're going to use one or two. And we didn't even extend the length of the video
Yeah.
because they had, I think, 2 or 3 ads in one break that amounts up to like 60 or 90 seconds. We didn't go the full length because, as you said, attention is a challenge.
Yeah.
So how do I get my message across in the shortest video possible?
Yeah.
Now I'm against like going too short, 10 seconds and 15 seconds just to hit that completed view numbers, because
Yeah.
don't try to hack human behavior in that way, because you're just hacking the numbers. You're not really resonating. So
Yeah.
find the shortest video that deliver the message well and invoke the emotion that you want to invoke, and it will work.
Excellent. Why do you think podcast advertising is interesting for brands? You mentioned the fact that it's not cluttered, right? That you're able to have a presence and deliver your message seamlessly without interrupting the experience, right? Because today this is the reality, as opposed to other channels, like video channels, for example, it's pretty cluttered. Podcast, perhaps not as much, right? Is it also in a channel where users are much more attentive, right, to the content? Is this an angle that for you is a selling point for podcast advertising?
Look, a podcast brings a value on a channel. Challenge is on the audio side. Now let's keep YouTube or the video side. But on the audio side, you're only invoking one sense, which is listen.
Yeah.
And that makes retention and recall much harder to achieve. But the positive side is trust. When it comes to podcasts, the trust among the customer is at the highest. They trust podcast more than TV, social, or any. So that's one important aspect. The second important aspect is if the podcast is not, or if the experience is not disrupted for too long, the audience will remain attentive. They have been focused and listening to the audio, and if the ads are short and the ad breaks are short, then they're not gonna attempt to skip. They are there to listen for 2-3 hours. In most cases, they're not gonna skip a 30-second. But if you start doing 2-3 minute breaks, people are gonna start
lost them, yeah.
and you're gonna lose that.
Yeah.
So they're gonna start trying to skip, because now it's worth the effort to skip the ad. If it was 30 seconds, it's not worth the effort to pick up the phone or whatever device and try to skip, because by the time you go through that, the ad is almost over.
Yeah. And if it's a host read, if it's the host is the one that is talking about the ad, the sponsorship, then there's no reason to skip. It's part of the content. The user will probably not even realize that this is an advertisement, or they will, but it won't be disruptive, right? It's like it will flow seamlessly.
It
right?
is disruptive.
Even if the host says this is brought to you by New Murabba, let's say, and this is what we're doing together. I know they've been supporting the show. They're building great stuff, right? I guess it's off topic.
It's disruptive, yeah. And the listener or the viewer wants to continue the topic that you started with them. Yeah. However, same rules apply. If it's short and sweet, or reasonable short, I'm not saying 10 seconds, like if it's within a 30-second mark, then and if the host puts it in a more interesting way than talking about the advertiser themselves or the product itself,
Yeah.
where they talk about how this product, how this ad is helping them do what they're doing
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
audience. There is that emotional connection that the
Yeah.
host is going to be
Yeah.
able to invoke in
Yeah.
the listener or the viewer.
But I also meant,
Mm.
in his voice as well.
Yeah.
Whereas the ad
Mm.
may be a completely different voice. I think it would be probably smarter to use the host's voice in the ad, right? Maybe. But I think this is why host reads, a little bit more, maybe less. I agree they are disruptive, but perhaps less disruptive than suddenly you hear an ad from a voice that's completely different, like a tone that's completely different, that's trying to, give you something, sell you something.
I'm not sure, but this could play into credibility as well.
Yeah.
Because you've kind of built that connection with the host over the time that you've been listening to this podcast. While the ad, as you say, that's some random voice. So listening from a person that you've been following for a while, kind of built that emotional connection with,
Yeah.
could play into credibility.
Yeah. And just like CTV, podcast advertising also has its challenges when it comes to measurement. You did mention that with the challenges, the existing challenges on measurement, today, we should still be able to measure the impact, perhaps by properly, using the tools at hand, whether it's perhaps the brand health tracker, maybe it's an MMM study that looks at all the different channels and the incrementality of different channels, and maybe that's a way to measure not just CTV's impact, but also podcast advertising.
Yes, definitely. And when you measure, you have to measure at every stage. So with podcasts, for example, you have to look at who is listening, how is it doing, how is podcasts in general doing in terms of trust, who is listening to these podcasts, like as a format, not just
Yeah.
as a specific program.
Yeah.
And that's you do when your due diligence before you buy this ad
Yeah.
product. And then during, you have to look at how are they doing in terms of retention, how are they doing in terms of views, and then you look at your bigger picture research, whether it's brand health, you look at search, you look at visits in the website. This is a cohesive measurement framework that looks at every aspect and does the due diligence in every aspect, but does not get obsessed with a single part where, no, I cannot measure what this podcast is doing for me, so I'm not gonna do it. If you don't like a product for some objective reasons and you don't want to invest in it, that's fine. But just the fact that they cannot measure every single dollar spent to revenue generated, then you shouldn't be doing marketing at all. Because that's impossible. No one has been able to crack that yet.
Yeah. Amazing. Mohammad, thank you so much for being on the show. I really enjoyed my conversation with you, and I hope you did as well. And I hope we do this again. I know that we'll do this again, actually. Would you like to share any parting words, perhaps maybe some encouragement for your fellow Saudi marketeers to come on the show?
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you very much for having me. As I said earlier, I've been following Below the Fold long before I've got to know you. And I really like having a podcast that speaks to our industry, because there are a lot of brilliant minds in MENA specifically when it comes to marketing. And part of the reasons I like to go to events a lot, like industry events a lot, is because I want to network with these people and learn from these people. Whatever is a question of the day is something that I take with me to those events. And I try talking to people about that question. I have this problem. I'm trying to measure an awareness activity that am I doing? How would you go about it? And you start speaking to people and they start giving you ideas and you're getting free consultancy
Yes.
from people. And I think the podcast is doing something similar in terms of bringing these great minds and making them accessible to people who are just entering the industry or someone who's working on something that's kind of new to them. They find podcasts where it helps shed the light on that aspect. So thank you for that, and thank you for having me. And I absolutely would encourage my Saudi colleagues to first get to know you, Ibrahim. You're a very nice person, and you have a good reputation in the market. But also be here and help share the knowledge. That's how we become better as an industry and a region. And I think we owe it to this region to try to make it the best. And if this would be the least that we can do.
Great, good stuff. Thank you so much, Muhammad. I really appreciate your words, and I hope to have you on the show again soon. If not in Dubai, inshallah, maybe we manage to do it also in Saudi Arabia, in the kingdom.
We should do the next one in Riyadh just to change.
Inshallah. I'll definitely have you on this on a show in Saudi.
Would love to. Thank you very much.
Thank you.